Welcome to this Bible study series on angels. This is session 6, Cherubims and Seraphims. So this session examines various angelic beings. Cherubims, the singular of that is cherub, living creatures. Seraphims, and the singular of that is seraph, and also beasts. We'll also look at some of their attributes, such as wings. We'll note that the descriptions in this session occur in visions. So, first of all, cherubims in Eden. Cherubims are first mentioned in Genesis. Genesis 3, verse 24. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims, and a flaming sword which turned every way, to keep the way of the tree of life. So, no description of cherubims is given here. And what I'll highlight is that Genesis is written after the descriptions in Exodus occurred. So Moses writes Genesis after Israel has been given the law, they've been given the tabernacle and the ark and the mercy seat, and they've seen all that. They've seen what cherubim look like, and so there's no description here. Now the question is, did they look like what Israel pictured in their heads? I don't know. So we want to note the sword and that the cherubim's purpose is protection. And I don't know why cherubims is capitalized, but there are many things in Genesis in the first few chapters that are capitalized when they first occur. So it's never capitalized otherwise. So now let's see cherubims in the tabernacle. Exodus 25, verses 18 through 22. And thou shalt make 2 cherubims of gold, of beaten work shalt thou make them, in the 2 ends of the mercy seat, and make 1 cherub on the one end, and the other cherub on the other end. Even of the mercy seat shall ye make the cherubims on the 2 ends thereof. And the cherubim shall stretch forth their wings on high, covering the mercy seat with their wings, and their faces shall look one to another. Toward the mercy seat shall the faces of the cherubims be. And thou shalt put the mercy seat above upon the ark, and in the ark thou shalt put the testimony that I shall give thee. And there I will meet with thee, and I will commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubims which are upon the ark of the testimony, of all things which I give thee in commandment unto the children of Israel. So, this is an image and not the real creature. So, this isn't a vision here. This is something that they were told to make, and what we learn in Exodus is that Moses had the people build what he saw, so God gave him some understanding of what he was supposed to make. So there would be a pattern, and then he would tell them, this is how you make it. So Moses wasn't guessing. This is what God wanted him to make. It is a created thing, not really the cherubims themselves. Now, it is likely that the cherubims have 2 wings. It doesn't say. Their wings are covering the mercy seat in verse 20. So we're going to learn later in some other descriptions that some other cherubims have 2 wings, and I'm going to say these probably did as well. So the ark is a coffin. The same word in Hebrew is used for both. So I got a word study on ark. You can go look into that. But basically, the same word that's translated ark is translated coffin once, and it has to do with when Joseph is taken out of Egypt. I think he's put in a coffin to be, taken back into the land of Israel to be buried with his fathers. So, something that we'll draw attention to later. Now, what about graven images? Exodus 20, verses 3 through 5 says, Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me. Now, my question is, aren't the cherubims graven images of something in heaven? It says, verse 4, in heaven above, on the earth beneath, or in the water under the earth. Now, you can find reasons for this to be an exception. First off, you can say, well, God told them to make it. And I would say that I doubt that that would be an exception. Well, God said I could break the law. I don't think so. But you think about it and decide. You can say they aren't bowing down to them or serving them, so it's okay to make the image. And I'll say that's verse 5, but verse 4 says not to make the image. So you decide whether or not you got to have both verses be true in order for them to be breaking the law. And then finally I'll say, or maybe they don't really look like that. So they made an image of something that isn't in heaven or on the earth or in the water under the earth. And I think that's the conclusion we should end up drawing when we go and look at the entirety of descriptions of cherubims and angels in general. You don't have to agree with that yet. Continue on and see if you understand that by the end. All right, now there are cherubims on the curtains. Exodus 26 verse 1 says, moreover, thou shalt make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twined linen, and blue and purple and scarlet, with cherubims of cunning work shalt thou make them. Doesn't say what they look like. Verse 31 says, and thou shalt make a veil of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen of cunning work, with cherubim shall it be made. So again, no description of what they look like. Moses knew. Of course, I don't think anybody today's got any idea what it looks like. But the whole idea of the cherubim on the curtains means the holy place and the most holy place are surrounded by cherubims. So there are cherubims on the curtains and the veil, but there are no descriptions of them. Now, cherubims in Solomon's temple. 1 Kings 6, verse 23 through 28. And within the oracle he made 2 cherubims of olive tree, each 10 cubits high. And 5 cubits was the one wing of the cherub, and 5 cubits the other wing of the cherub. From the uttermost part of the one wing unto the uttermost part of the other were 10 cubits. And the other cherub was 10 cubits. Both the cherubims were of one measure and one size. The height of one cherub was 10 cubits, and so was it of the other cherub. And he set the cherubims within the inner house, and they stretched forth their wings of the cherubims, so that the wing of the one touched the one wall, and the wing of the other cherub touched the other wall, and their wings touched one another in the midst of the house. And he overlaid the cherubims with gold. So these cherubims are pretty big. 10 cubits is about 15 feet tall. But again, these are graven images. Say, well, they're not graven, they're made of wood, but still, they're not supposed to make anything with their hands. So these do have 2 wings. It pretty much tells us that. And I'm going to guess the ones on the mercy seat probably did also, as well as the ones that are, on the curtains. Now, still, cherubims in Solomon's temple, 1 Kings 6, 29 to 35. And he carved all the walls of the house round about with carved figures of cherubims and palm trees and open flowers within and without. And the floor of the house he overlaid with gold within and without. And for the entering of the oracle he made doors of olive tree. The lintel and the side posts were a 5th part of the wall. The 2 doors also were of olive tree, and he carved upon them carvings of cherubims and palm trees and open flowers, and overlaid them with gold, and spread gold upon the cherubims and upon the palm trees. He also made he for the door of the temple posts of olive tree, a 4th part of the wall. And the 2 doors were of fir tree. The 2 leaves of the one door were folding, and the 2 leaves of the other door were folding. And he carved thereon cherubims and palm trees and open flowers, and covered them with gold fitted upon the carved work. So these cherubims are carved on the wall, just like the tabernacle's curtains had cherubims in them. So notice some of the things mentioned: gold, olive tree. These are real, but they symbolize something, particularly olive tree. The olive tree represents spiritual Israel, Spiritual access to God. The door is made of olive tree. You have spiritual access to God. If you go back to see what the cherubims are made of, they're made out of olive tree as well. So you got to think about what these mean. Even though this isn't a vision with symbols, this is a real thing, a real temple made with items that are real, but they mean something. They're teaching Israel something. Whether or not they were learning it, don't know. Now, let's recall God's chariot. We studied these previously. So Ezekiel 1 talks about the whirlwind coming out of the north. I'm not going to read all these because we read them already. Elijah, the whirlwind was coming to get him, and then eventually it takes him up. So now we'll go back to the living creatures of Ezekiel 1. I'm not going to read these again. We already read them. You can pause the video and read it, or open your Bible and read it. I'm just going to refer to what we have here. So remember, this is a vision. The living creatures have 4 wings and 4 faces. And to me, this is all symbolism. They have 2 wings on the ark, or on the mercy seat. They have 4 wings now. Why? Well, it's a different species of cherubim. Okay, so they've evolved? I don't think so. You can say, well, God made different varieties of them. I still don't think so. Well, let's press on. So Ezekiel 1, 10 through 14. Again, I'm not going to read it. You can pause it. So the 4 faces here are 4 aspects of Jesus. As I said in the last session, you can go to the study called Why 4 Gospel Accounts. And that's what's being taught here. These 4 aspects of Jesus are elsewhere in Scripture. That's why we shouldn't take this in isolation. Now, notice the focus on the wings. There's a lot of talk about them, and I can't explain all the symbology that is present here, and just because I can't explain it doesn't make it real. And we'll look at burning coals of fire and lamps in another session. So we're going to postpone that. Now, still in Ezekiel 1, 22 to 26. Not going to read it. Basically, God sits on his throne above the firmament. Okay, so this gives us information about creation as well, and we're not going to study that here, though. There is a study on creation. It's going to go into that, and the firmament of Genesis 1 and the firmament mentioned here helps give you understanding, but we'll just continue on. So Ezekiel 10, 1 through 7, we read this before. This is the cherubims of God's chariot. Verse 2, I want to highlight this man clothed in linen. We're going to talk about him in the next session, but I just want to highlight, what's a man doing on God's chariot? Unless angels are men. Now, Ezekiel 10, 8 through 15. Again, I'm not going to read it. The cherubims are full of eyes. We're going to get into that later. Then 16 through 22. This is God's glory departing from the temple. That's the purpose of the vision. Okay, the purpose of the vision is not to describe what the cherubims look like. Now, Ezekiel 41, verses 18 through 25, these are cherubim in the future temple. We have not read this before, so I'm going to read this. Not going to explain much of it. Starting with verse 18, and it was made with cherubims and palm trees, so that a palm tree was between a cherub, and every cherub had 2 faces, so that the face of a man was toward the palm tree on the one side, and the face of a young lion toward the palm tree on the other side. It was made through all the house round about. From the ground unto above the door were cherubims and palm trees made, and on the wall of the temple. The posts of the temple were squared, and the face of the sanctuary, and the appearance of the one as the appearance of the other. The altar of wood was 3 cubits high, and the length thereof 2 cubits, and the corners thereof, and the length thereof, and the walls thereof were of wood. And he said unto me, This is the table that is before the Lord. And the temple and the sanctuary had 2 doors, and the doors had 2 leaves apiece, 2 turning leaves, 2 leaves for the one door, and 2 leaves for the other door. And there were made on them, on the doors of the temple, cherubims and palm trees, like as were made upon the walls, and there were thick planks upon the face of the porch without. So the symbology is similar to Solomon's temple. There are some things that are quite similar, but then there's some differences. Now, it mentions 2 faces, and there's no mentioning of wings. So maybe they're not mentioned. Likewise, in Solomon's temple, the cherubims on the wall, we don't know whether or not there were wings on those, or on the curtains of the tabernacle. It doesn't really tell us. Now you might say, well, they have 4 faces, you just can't see them. And I'll say, well, you should be able to see 3, the one on the left, the one on the right, and the one looking at you. But this only says 2. And to me, the point of it is in the future temple, in the millennium, Jesus has already come. He's still the lion, he's still the king, he's still a man, but he's no longer the servant. And I guess the attribute of God isn't really necessary to highlight that. No, that's the best I can do trying to explain it. The ego meaning God. Okay, now we'll go to seraphims. And, most people will say, well, seraphims and cherubims, those are different. Why are you comparing them? Because they're similar. That's why I'm comparing them. Isaiah 6, verses 1 through 7. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Above it stood the seraphims. So above it meaning above the temple. Each one had 6 wings. With twain he covered his face, and with twain he covered his feet, and with twain he did fly. And one cried unto another, and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the posts of the door moved at the voice of him that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. Then said I, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then flew one of the seraphims unto me, having a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with the tongs from off the altar. And he laid it upon my mouth, and said, Lo, this hath touched thy lips, and thine iniquity is taken away, and thy sin purged. Now seraph means burning one. It also appears translated as fiery serpent, meaning the Hebrew word. And of course, we'll see serpent. It's another word for angel. Now these have 6 wings. And they perform a ritual that can take away sin. Now this is in a vision, but the vision is teaching Isaiah something. And we're going to dive into it more so in the next session. I also want to highlight, verse 3 says, the whole earth is full of his glory. What about heaven? Well, the focus of what's going on in the Bible is mostly the earth. The dispensation of grace, the focus is turned to the heavens. So God has sent man and Israel to take back the earth, and that's what the focus is. So again, these wings are going to mean something. Now the beasts around the throne in heaven. Revelation 4, verses 6 through 9. And before the throne was a sea of glass like unto crystal. And in the midst of the throne and round about the throne were 4 beasts full of eyes before and behind. The first beast was like a lion, and the second beast like a calf. And the third beast had a face as a man, and the fourth beast was like a flying eagle. And the 4 beasts had each of them 6 wings about him. And they were full of eyes within, and they rest not day and night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, which was and is to come. And when those beasts give glory and honor and thanks to him that sat on the throne, who liveth forever and ever, And the passage goes on. I've stopped there mid-sentence. Don't worry about that. Go read it if you want. So I'll highlight what's in verse 8. The seraphims also said, "Holy, holy, holy," and they also had 6 wings. So you may say, well, no, but these aren't the same thing. These are a different race. Okay, so we'll look later at why these are probably the same thing and what these things really mean. Now the descriptions of the beasts link this to Ezekiel's vision. You got the lion, the calf, the man, the eagle. It's not just the faces, although it says the face of a man, but the other one says the beast was like a lion, like a calf. Whereas the cherubim, it was their face that looked like these creatures. So that's why people say, well, see, these are different. No, the vision has different meaning. And I can't explain it all. As I said, the beasts have 6 wings, and we need to pay attention to elsewhere in Revelation, beast is used to mean other things. So like the beast ascended out of the sea. Okay, so beast means something. And likewise, it has meaning here. Just like the cherubim, I think it's going to mean represents a group of angels. But we'll see that a little bit later. All right, so let's summarize where we've seen cherubims and the other words. So I'm going to give the reference, the term used, essentially a description. Then we'll talk about the count, how many of them were there, the faces, and how many wings. There were other attributes, but these are the ones I'm going to focus on. So Genesis 3 mentioned cherubims at the Garden of Eden, and there's really nothing told. Exodus 25 has images on the mercy seat, and there were 2. We don't know if there was one face, but it seems to make sense that there would be. And there's probably 2 wings based upon what we read about the temple. Now, there were also some images on the curtain, but there's really no description. So 1 Kings 6 had cherubims. These were images in Solomon's temple. There were 2. Doesn't tell us about their faces, probably 1. And there were 2 wings. Now Ezekiel 1 mentions the living creatures. These are part of God's chariot. There's 4 of them. They have 4 faces and 4 wings. Ezekiel 10's really the same thing, but they're called cherubims now. We don't know how many of them there are, probably 4. There are 4 faces and, again, 4 wings. Ezekiel's temple description or images in the future temple, there's no mention of the count or their wings, but they have 2 faces. Isaiah 6 mentions the seraphims, and this is in the throne in heaven. There's no mention of count. There's certainly more than 1. There's probably 1 face. Probably, I don't know that for sure. Then there are 6 wings. And the Revelation 4 mentions the beast around the throne in heaven. There are 4 of them. We don't know how many faces, evidently 1, since they appear to be like a creature. And then there are 6 wings. So, going to speculate here. I think the pairs of wings might denote God's progress on his plan. So, with looking at them as pairs, there's 1, 2, and 3 pairs. So the first pair of wings might represent the old law covenant. God has made his nation in the earth called Israel, and he's given them the law, and he's saying that's progress with what I'm doing. Jesus' first coming as what the 4 faces symbolize, and that's the next bit of progress that I've made. And then in the future, at the second coming, you're going to see the forgiveness of sin, and that's going to be really the completion. It's all going to be done, and heaven and earth will be basically under Jesus' authority. And you might go back and question, well, what about Isaiah 6? That wasn't really in the future. But I think that's what the seraphims are showing, It's a picture of taking away sin, which will come at the end, because Israel as a nation won't have their sin forgiven until the second coming. So I don't have a problem if you don't like that. It's a bit sloppy. It's the best I can do, but it's better than saying there's different races of angels and different numbers of wings. What are they doing with them? What do you do with 6 wings? Just like the leopard with 4 wings. He's not flying. It's a picture of something. So if you want to agree that it's symbolic and you want to come up with your own explanation, have at it. But I've struggled with that one for a long time. And I think it shows, God's progress through time. While Israel comes on the scene quite a bit of time after 2,000 years, certainly Abraham came at that time frame, and Jesus comes at 4,000 years, and his second coming will be really a little bit after 6,000 years. All of that being from Adam. So, if you don't like all that, that's fine. I'm trying to explain what the wings might mean, rather than just say they mean something and, move on. All right, let's go back to the mercy seat and get a better understanding of cherubims and angels. So Exodus describes 2 cherubims on the mercy seat. I'll go ahead and read this one again. So Exodus 25, 18 through 20. And thou shalt make 2 cherubims of gold, of beaten work shalt thou make them in the 2 ends of the mercy seat. And make 1 cherub on the one end, and the other cherub on the other end. Even of the mercy seat shall you make the cherubims of the 2 ends. Okay, and then the last verse talks about them having their wings over it. So really I want to focus on verse 19. There's 1 cherub on one end and 1 cherub on the other. And my question is that a model of the tomb? My answer is going to be yes, but you decide. So John 20 verses 11 and 12 says, But Mary stood without at the sepulchre weeping. And as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the sepulchre, and seeth 2 angels in white sitting, the one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. So my thought is the ark is a coffin, and the mercy seat is where God sits above the coffin, and the blood would be sprinkled on that mercy seat, and sin would be forgiven. Well, likewise, Jesus laid on a slab in a cave, I'll call it a tomb, and obviously he's been resurrected, and the 2 angels are sitting on the mercy seat where the blood was sprinkled, because when he died, he still had blood all over him. And so the blood was put on the mercy seat and obviously has been accepted by God. So if this is the case, then cherubims are simply angels. They're angels with some kind of higher authority. And I think it confirms they don't have wings, because they're not described as having any. So you wrestle with that. You can decide whether or not the ark is a model of the tomb. I think it is. So in conclusion, we looked at several angelic beings. I think they're really just angels. We're gonna see that confirmation in the next session. Many of the visions communicate an organization. So the angels are leaders of these organizations. And I'll say, are the 4 beasts the same as the 4 spirits of heaven in Zechariah 6? I don't know. Could be. We will look at these angels again in the next session. We'll focus on why some of the names are used. Thank you.